Regardless of what the useful idiots in our society say or what China's impressive propaganda machine is cranking out, I'm sure I'm not alone in coming to some very nasty conclusions about China, and the recent reappearance of terms like Chinophobia is no coincidence. Because, as we all know, if you add phobia to any group, it delegitimizes all criticism of said group, and that term will be permanently screamed by the perpetually outraged. I'm not really one for taking conspiracy theories seriously, but I would be remiss if I didn't at least lay out my concerns so you lovely chaps can either agree or call me crazy. China have, time and time again, shown absolute disregard for the rest of humanity, whether it's bullying their neighbours, committing human rights violations, or pumping more pollution into the atmosphere than any other nation, being responsible for nearly 30% of all CO2 emissions in 2018, an absolutely huge number for any one nation. Given how much money world governments are flooding into renewable energy markets to fight climate change, and the doomsday predictions of scientists claiming the point of no return is on the horizon, they all seem to be silent on the elephant in the room, which is China. It's no wonder that people in the world are starting to believe it's not as big of a problem as they claim, because scientists themselves are ignoring the biggest factor. On top of their extreme environmental impact, there is of course the topic that we've all come to know far too well for far too long, and that is of course the coronavirus. It's pretty much universally accepted at this point that they lied and that the world governments are all just too polite to call them on it. Whether it escaped from a Chinese lab or was the result of the weird Chinese desire to eat everything they can get their hands on just isn't relevant right now. The fact is they withheld vital information which could have saved an extreme amount of lives. But they've been extremely difficult with giving anyone, even the WHO, relevant information. Some Chinese scientists have come forward secretly admitting that they need outside help, but China refuses, determined to keep the investigation entirely in-house. The World Health Organization has sent teams to China to investigate the origins of the virus, which would help fight against it and future viruses of a similar type. However, China insists on taking the lead in any and all investigations, which means the WHO are getting second-hand information and being forced to trust the Chinese are being honest in the data that they hand over. And as the world economy shrinks, the reliance on cheap crap from China will only increase. And who knows, some in China may consider this payback for the century of humiliation, as they call it. And even Chinese goodwill missions sending aid to foreign countries is overshadowed by the vast majority of it not working or actually being contaminated with the coronavirus. So much so that some countries have actually refused to accept their help. It's not just the trust of the world that's been damaged, but the global economy has taken a nasty hit as well. However, this point could be seen as an advantage to the Chinese Communist Party, who have the infrastructure and iron grip on their society to force a nationwide lockdown at the drop of a hat with very little resistance from their people. There has also been a huge disinformation campaign in China to shift the blame of the coronavirus onto America, with Chinese state news broadcasters even calling it the American virus, despite the obvious and overwhelming evidence to the contrary. And on top of this, to compound the insult to America, China has threatened to detain US citizens within China in retaliation for arrests of Chinese so-called scholars who are convicted of visa fraud, for failing to declare that they are in fact members of the Chinese military and are suspected of espionage. You arrest our spies who lied to get into your country, and we'll arrest your civilians for no good reason. These are not good people. We see that all too often with how they treat their neighbours. Look at the situation between India and China, or how they continue to suppress Taiwan, not seeing them as the unique people they are, but as a territory that needs to be brought to heel. Their human rights abuses have recently been laid bare for the world to see, with their treatment of the Uyghur population, a name I'm probably butchering, but they've got bigger problems to deal with at the moment. Their use of camps to force them to swearing absolute loyalty to the Chinese state is something out of a dystopian nightmare novel, and not a modern 21st century headline. But here we are. And despite this, China was accepted to the UN Council of Human Rights, and then has the audacity to make human rights suggestions to America, one of which was systematic racism, coming from a country which held an art exhibit comparing black people to monkeys. Does anybody know the Chinese word for irony? Among all of the shady, dodgy dealings and dystopian horrors China is guilty of inflicting on its people and beyond, China still has the audacity to accuse other people of the things it's blatantly doing itself. They threaten mysterious consequences on the UK for interfering with Hong Kong, as we try to offer a few of them an out of the communist regime. Even though Hong Kong was a British colony until 1997, and the Chinese interference was meant to be minimal for 50 years, as you can see from the protests in Hong Kong, that's not the case. And talking about foreign interference, China is investing heavily in Africa, which on the face of it seems like a good thing, right? Well, with the Chinese, there's always an underlying motive to anything they do. There's always an edge or some way to gain an advantage. There is extremely strong evidence to suggest that they used the nice, shiny headquarter building that they built for the African Union to steal their secrets for over 5 years, secretly downloading the information from their servers between midnight and 2 AM every night while the building was completely empty, transferring the data to servers in Shanghai. And these are the same people who are absolutely desperate to secure contracts here in the UK, as well as other nations across the world, to work on the 5G infrastructure. What's a little bit of digital espionage among friends? Given how aggressive China is getting with their neighbours, their data gathering, be it from African servers or Chinese military agents in America, or the millions that they've been pouring into their military, it certainly seems like they're preparing themselves to take some kind of drastic action on a global scale. All these issues on their own could be dismissed, but when you look at the whole picture, it starts adding up to one big ugly situation that the global community needs to deal with. And I feel like I've really only scratched the surface of this topic. Well, that about wraps up this video. Thank you for listening to my rather disjointed rant. I just had to get that off my chest because no one else seems to be connecting the dots about China, and I find it all rather troubling. So, lovely viewers, what information do you think China wants from you? I'll put the answers that make me laugh the most at the end of my next video, and as always, thank you for your time.